And
Well, good evening. Welcome to another round, another post-Masters round with Gary Popovich and Brian Robin uh, at your service. I want to tell you my favorite story about golf. Remember Aaron Brown, CNN reporter, either one of you?
yeah,
So there
I
used to
do,
be, you
yeah.
guys would know, a tournament, right? There used to be a tournament the same weekend as the Masters. It was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I think this is the way this story goes. Anyway, so Aaron Brown does a story. He says, and he introduces it, and he says, uh, "There's another tournament going on, another golf tournament this weekend in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and this one guy, it is the lowest earnings stop on the PGA. This one guy won. His name was Tim whatever. He won $180,000 for his first place finish." And then Aaron Brown looks at the camera and goes, "That's not so bad. What'd you do this weekend?" Which I love that story. So you too. What'd you do this weekend?
Didn't win $180,000, that's for sure.
no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. Watched the
Which, by the way, if you finished, I think it's like T22, that's about what you made.
There you
Somewhere
go.
in that neighborhood. Yeah.
All right. So what happened this weekend, guys? And how come we're dark here? Who am I not seeing?
So um, Scottie Scheffler, to the surprise of very few people, won the Masters. It's the second time he's won it. He's the youngest guy to do that, to win two Masters. Um, and Brian, I'm going to make a little comparison here and see what you think about it. Okay. Um, to me, Scottie Scheffler reminds me of another talented guy in a different sport altogether. And that guy is the center for the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic. Reason why I make that comparison is Jokic has won, well, he's won two MVPs, should have won a third one last year. Uh, and the Nuggets won the title. And when you look at Jokic, uh, he's a big man who's incredibly skilled uh, on the basketball court. Great shooter, great passer, decent enough defender, and usually does something at least once a game where you just kind of like scratching your head and saying, how the hell did he do that? At the same time, he is probably the least excitable basketball player I've ever seen. When Denver finally won the title last year, Jokic, he celebrated with his teammates after the game. He's very happy. And problem was that they were going to have the parade a couple days afterwards. And he was really upset by that. He wanted to go home to Serbia and be with his horses. And the press asked him, "Well, why, why are you, why are you so upset about going to a parade?" And his response was, "Don't you guys ever get tired of your job? Don't you want to go home?" And it was interesting because after the tournament yesterday, Scotty said something very interesting, uh, which I was really kind of surprised to hear him say this. He said, "Golf is my job. It's a very unfulfilling job, and I can't wait to get home because my wife is due, and I want to go home for a few weeks and chill out," which I thought was uh, kind of an interesting reaction, particularly given the quality of golf he's been playing for the last 6 weeks or so. I don't know what you think about that, but
The Jokic comparison is interesting, and I could see the wheels started turning when you mentioned it. The funny thing about Scheffler is he's, grew up in Texas. He went to the same high school that Clayton Kershaw and Matt Stafford went to, Highland Park High in the ritzy Dallas North burbs.
mm-hmm.
But he was a product of his golf environment. I mean, he grew up playing golf, grew up playing junior golf in Texas, went to UT. So he punches all the buttons of one of these, golf junkies that we seem to find, growing on trees these days. The Jokic comparison is an apt one when you look at his skills too, because the least excitable person that's Scottie Scheffler. I mean, he's you know, game wise, he's got everything, but personality wise, he's basically one of your golf drones that I think, if Dan Jenkins was still alive, Jenkins would have a field day with this guy because he could just use all the adjectives to describe about how Scottie Scheffler has no adjectives to define his personality. The thing about him that amazes me, Gary, and maybe you can answer this, is how in God's green earth has he not won a U.S. Open yet? Because if there's ever a player who's had a game for a U.S. Open,
he's come close.
since he's come close, but outside of Ernie Els and Hale Irwin, I can't think of anybody who's got a game that's completely dialed into winning 4 U.S. Opens. I really can't. And it astounds me that he's got 2 green jackets and no Opens yet. But you're still young.
Can I just say what you both brought up about this guy is one of the problems. And again, I'm not as focused on it as you are. I took a walk this morning with a friend of mine who also doesn't love golf, and he said, "Did you watch any of the tournament?" I said, "Not really." He said, "But I found out," this is him talking, "that only 3 guys have won 2 Masters before their 28th birthday: Tiger, Nicklaus, and this guy."
There's actually
Scheffler
4.
is
Actually 4.
Scheffler is yeah, but Scheffler is this guy
Yeah.
or that guy.
There's actually 4 who have done it. The 3 you mentioned and Seve Ballesteros did it as well.
Right.
But
Scheffler's is the youngest.
He's actually the 4th youngest. He's 27. Nicklaus did it at 25. Woods did it at 25. Seve did it at 26. But still, point taken, he's still keeping pretty damn good company.
He is, and I have no doubt that there's more majors in Scottie's future. From tee to, it's just been interesting to see. You mentioned how he hasn't won a U.S. Open yet. Up until the Ryder Cup of 2022, nobody really knew Scottie Scheffler. You knew that he was on tour. He had not won a tour event up to that point. He was a very solid player, and he was a captain's pick for that Ryder Cup team. The main reason being is that they needed somebody who could play, who could tolerate playing with Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah.
And we say, that personality-wise, seems kind of drab, but he's a guy who gets along, seems to get along with just about anybody, and that Ryder Cup experience for him, I think, is what really launched him into the limelight, and he started winning tournaments after that. The main the main thing with Scheffler is his putting, and as you likely know, he went through almost a year period where he was consistently in top 10 finishes in all tournaments, but was not winning because his putting was failing him. And about 6 weeks ago, Rory McIlroy, in an interview with somebody else, I don't know if you ever talked to Scheffler about this or not, but he made the suggestion that maybe he should switch from a blade putting style, a blade putter, to a mallet putter. And he wound up doing that. I think he went and got some putting advice from Brad Faxon, who's retired from the tour, but is one of the great putters that ever played on tour. And then he grew a beard. And I don't know what that what that had to do with anything, other than the fact that he did all 3 of those things, and all of a sudden he started winning again. He won the TPC, or excuse me, the Players Championship, which some call the 5th major, and he's just been on a tear since then. And it'll be interesting. You mentioned the U.S. Open this year. It'll be a couple months away. That'll be at Pinehurst, where putting and short game is really going is a premium at that golf course. He'll go in as a favorite, but
What happens? What happens to golfers though? I mean, wasn't Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler and Rory McIlroy supposed to be the next Tigers? What happened? I mean, Spieth really disappeared, didn't he? I mean, I don't mean disappeared, but they were givens, all of them. And I think there are more. I don't know them all. But what happens? Is a game attract that many more good players, or is it just an impossible sport to be successful over years?
Brian, I'll let you take
Yes.
that first.
Yes. Yes. To all of that. Does the game is it attracting great players? Yeah. Yearly. There's always some young stud that comes up out of nowhere, or even in the case of Ludwig Oberg, who we'll probably get to in a moment, comes to you with a lot of advanced warning and foreshadowing that this guy's going to be really, really good. These are different situations with Rory and Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler. There is no one answer that covers all three of them. Fowler's situation was I kind of am partial to Ricky because he grew up not too far from me, and several of my buddies actually covered him when he was in high school at Murrieta Valley High School, out in South Riverside County. And Ricky was just a prodigy then. I mean, he shot 62 in one of the state tournaments to win the state title here in California. That was as a 16-year-old, by the way. His case was he got really, really popular really, really quickly. And I think he bought into the whole party lifestyle. And I don't mean party that he's going out and drinking and that kind of thing, but he's generally having a good time. And all of a sudden, the things he found coming easy to him weren't coming easy to him anymore. Spieth's situation is just, that's the nature of his game. He's going to be a very manic depressive player. That's his game.
That's a perfect description. Even that magical year he had in 2015, he was never. He probably, I would compare him to like a Seve Ballesteros in that he was not particularly accurate driver of the ball, a pretty decent iron player, but that year, he putted like.
No, he made everything he looked at. Yeah,
exactly. And similar story with Spieth. High school phenom in Dallas. I was living, I was living in that area at the time. Big star at Jesuit High School in Dallas. Played 1 year at Texas UT and then turned pro. And it's interesting, Brian, because people at that time talked about how mature he was for somebody his age. And in one sense, it's true. He's always been somebody who's very seems very grounded. His family, although they belonged to a club, they were working people. Also has a sister who has Down syndrome.
Yeah,
He's very close to, and just from a from a human being's perspective, he's a really he seems to be a very decent person.
Fowler's the same way. He's checks all those boxes as well.
But again, the difference between the two guys we're talking about and a Scottie Scheffler. The Scottie Scheffler is the best pure ball striker I've seen. The only guy I could really compare him to is Johnny Miller back in the 70s when Miller had that was legitimately challenging Jack Nicklaus as the world's best golfer. Miller's problem, of course, was that again came down to putting, but from tee to green he was magnificent. Scottie seems to have cured or at least temporarily has cured the putting problem.
He's a better putter than Johnny Miller was.
Yeah, well, yeah,
without a doubt. And I mean,
he went through that spell where
yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
So
if you look
anyway,
what he did, you look what he did this weekend. I mean, he
yeah,
was third in putting in the field.
right.
So he was third in putting on greens that are harder than the hardwood floor that my feet are on right now. So, you know, it's one of the things when his putting is on, he's unbeatable, and we saw that this weekend.
Yeah. It doesn't even have to be great Crenshaw like putting. It can just be, you know,
No,
average putting, which he was not doing for a long time. But to get to your question, Barry, and it's some, you know, golfers at any level go through periods of time that uh, where mentally something's going on that you know impacts their swing or their approach to the game. Um, Golfers, I think one of the worst curses for golfers in general is the variety of equipment, and at the professional level, the variety of opportunities that are out there. And you know, we've seen examples in the past where guys might change their equipment, and all of a sudden they go into some kind of slump, or they're you know they're getting a lot of sponsorship deals and maybe not spending as much time on their game.
that was Ricky's problem to a certain extent.
You know,
He,
yeah, I think Spieth too, to be quite honest. Uh, but any event, the amount of focus that's required to play great golf is almost inhuman. Uh, you know, Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods just had that tremendous mental discipline you know in their primes. Uh, I think Scheffler actually has that. Now he's not going to be a guy who's going to bring droves of people into the game because again he's not a particularly charismatic guy. But for people who you know enjoy watching golf, you know people who are hardcore as we are, uh, he's a joy to watch. Uh, I think.
I
Th-
think
That's
Andy, I think Andy North. Let me squeeze this in, Barry.
Yeah, no, but
I think Andy North last night absolutely nailed why Scottie Scheffler is going to be a force on this tour for probably the next decade. Because unlike a lot of guys that get to this level, and yes, you have to have an ungodly amount of self-absorption to be a professional golfer at the truly elite level.
mm,
You have to. The game demands it, and the competition around you demands it. But the thing that Andy North said absolutely, was dead on nails. The thing about Scheffler is he's comfortable who he is. He's not going to go out there and try to say, oh, you know what, I need to pick up another 20 yards of distance, or I need to do this, a little more of this, or I need to change my swing this way to adapt.
mm.
He is who he is, and who he is pretty damn good. And so why does he need to? He's not going to do anything. He's not going to change what's got him here. He's
No,
not going to tinker with his swing. He's not going to do any of those ridiculous things that we've seen other players do, and I include Tiger Woods in that category, to try to make himself, quote, get better.
he's got
he
that.
won't go. He won't though until he starts losing, and then he'll have the same press conference, and Andy North will say he realized he couldn't keep doing what he was doing, and he made changes, and that's how he regained his form. I mean, it works now because it works now. But Brian, your point about Tiger, I want to ask you both just quickly about Tiger. Who had a terrible tournament. He made the cut, but it was pretty embarrassing the last two rounds, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
My question is, um, has the golf world moved on from the shadow of Tiger Woods, and the rest of us are still wondering whether there's still another hurrah for him?
So, and mine might be the contrarian view here. This is um, the one thing about Tiger in this tournament. And yeah, he had, um, his Sunday round was atrocious, for lack of a better word. But a couple things that I kind of took out of it. when he played his round on Friday, which was played in those 30 to 40-mile-an-hour winds, was really a terrific round of golf. I thought that was a Tiger
Absolutely was.
who was fighting, fighting the elements, stayed disciplined. Barry, there was one hole on the 18th hole. There's two bunkers in front of the green. He actually put a second shot in the right-hand bunker. The wind was blowing so hard that sand was coming out of the bunker across the green and actually blowing into his face.
Looked like the Martian. It's exactly what it reminded me of.
He withstood it, got out of that, got up and down, made par, and it was a terrific round of golf. What I noticed in both his third and fourth round, because I was really curious about, his Sunday round, but in the middle of the round, he just seemed to lose his swing entirely. And I don't know if it was because of his back or just, still, rust from not playing and not playing a lot of golf this year. The one thing I'll say that, if you are a Tiger, fanatic, I never really have been, but I'm starting to, for some reason, I was really interested in watching him this weekend. Physically, he got around the course. I don't know how he felt afterwards, but he looked reasonably physically able to handle, the ups and downs, the hills of Augusta. Previous 2 years, I mean, it was obvious he was laboring after the first couple of rounds, and and that was it for him for pretty much the remainder of the year. Physically, he looked okay. The other thing that I found really interesting was, I did, I put on the Masters app on Sunday morning and watched him play with Shipley, the amateur, Neil Shipley, and it was interesting to watch because he was, he's still, playing seriously, but between shots, he was talking to Shipley. They seemed to be having a good time on the course. And the thing I really kind of admired about him during that round, and again, he didn't play particularly well on Sunday, but he didn't do the old Tiger, intimidation act. He talked to the young man, made him feel comfortable, and as a result, Shipley played a nice round of golf. And I don't know. It's I don't see him. I don't see Tiger. You never say never, but it's going to be hard given his physical condition and the fact that he's just not going to be playing very much for him to really contend in anything anymore. But I was really impressed by that round and just seeing how he conducted himself with the young man. Although I did push back on you a little bit about the Butler Captain scene with Shipley, but
yeah,
but I understood it. Look, this kid's he graduated from college in 3 years. He's an IT person, so naturally he's got no personality to begin with. Having been in that business
I was
myself
going to say,
for
and
years,
you speak from experience on this front. I know.
yeah. And one sense I felt, yeah, he did have that deer in the headlights look. But then, if you're sitting in Butler Cabin with two of the best golfers in the world, and Jim Nance and Fred Ridley, you might feel a little intimidated.
No, I get the whole atmosphere bit. I mean, you're sitting there, you got Rahm, you got Scheffler, you've got Fred Ridley, one of the masters of the universe, who's the chairman of Augusta National.
The Great White Father, Chris.
What's that?
The Great White Father.
The Great White Father, and then you got Mr. Hello Friends himself.
Right.
I get the whole you're in awe of your situation. But even with all of that, Neil Shipley, I've seen hostage videos that were more cuddly than that. He looked, I've never seen somebody look that absolutely terrified. And yes, I saw the interview with Manny Zerman that you referred to on my Facebook page. Manny Zerman didn't look that terrified as Neil Shipley. I mean, I genuinely felt sorry for the kid. And I'm like, you just went out and shot 73 on an incredibly difficult golf course with, as you put it, an icon. Have some fun with the situation. I mean,
I think he had his fun on the course. It was,
he
it was evident.
obviously, but
It was
you're
evident.
sitting, you're sitting in Butler Cabin. How grueling can that be? How many people can say they sat in Butler Cabin in that atmosphere? I mean, have some fun with it. As
Well,
far as Tiger goes, this was the first tournament, 72 holes that he finished in 13, almost 14 months. Last time he finished a tournament was the Genesis at Riviera in February of 2023. And it's the first time he finished a majors in 2 years. He hadn't finished a major since the 22 Masters. I think in Tiger's situation, he's going to be one of those golfers that you could bet to make the cut at Augusta, probably, I won't say as long as he plays, but probably well into his early 50s, maybe even mid 50s, just because he knows every blade of grass on that golf course. But you are definitely seeing a lion in winter right now. He's not going to be playing a lot of tournaments.
no.
And my roommate and I, as we were watching it, he asked if he was going to play the seniors tour. And I said, he may play like a senior open just because it would give him a chance to win another USGA title. And I know that's something that kind of, motivates Tiger, even though it's a quote senior major.
Right.
But I don't see him playing very much going down,
No.
coming down the stretch of his the run in on his career right now. I mean, he's made 24 consecutive cuts at the Masters, which is a record. I could easily see him making more, but you're not going to see him making more in other tournaments. I just don't see it.
So
While we're talking about, I'm sorry, Gary, cut you
oh
off.
no, I should just going to bring it back to you, back to your original question, which so I think the short answer is, yeah, we're moving out of that era, and and who knows what's in store for us after that.
Well, speaking of eras and errors, let's talk about Tom Watson and Greg Norman. What happened there?
Okay, so we'll talk about Norman first. Now, Greg Norman has never won a Masters. He's had some colossal meltdowns at the Masters, but until last year, not as a player, but Norman was always extended an invitation from Augusta National to play because he's kind of part of the story about the Masters, if
Right.
for no other reason. Now, last year, when tensions were really running high with the Live versus PGA feud, Norman was asked not to come because it was, he was not extended an invitation because he thought that he was going to be a distraction, which he likely would have.
He would have been.
Yeah. He was not extended an invitation this year, so he went out to the secondary ticket market and got a ticket to come to the tournament. And to listen to him, he was very warmly greeted by the spectators. Everybody misses him. Welcome back. My hand is sore from shaking so many hands with the patrons here, and the rhetoric is very similar to the guy who started, whose trial started this morning in New York. So, but it was it was pretty curious. Oh, the other thing was that well, I'm here to support my live golfers. Uh, as I, anyway, he managed to, be a minor spectacle. I don't think he really detracted from, no fights broke out because he was there, but he managed to get himself, back on the, pages of golf magazines again.
Well, it's tough to forgive him for everything he's done to Chris Everett. So, you know,
Well, that
with,
Add that to his already sterling resume.
that was unforgivable. They married for a week, whatever it was, but that was terrible.
Well, part of that too. I mean, not to get into tennis gossip, but apparently the final straw for Chris was her ex-husband Andy Mills showed up one day to visit his kids, their kids, and Norman wouldn't let him in the house, and that was kind of the final straw for Chris.
So this behavior with him is not new. All right, so let's talk about the live PGA divide. What went on this weekend? Was there any story this weekend other than Scheffler? It was a pretty mild tournament, right? There was not a lot of fireworks or
Well,
backstory.
the live storyline was never far from the surface. Yes, the tensions were a lot lighter. Well, until Tom Watson threw a stink bomb in the
He is really
champions
good at
dinner,
that. He is really good at that, isn't he?
which just, I mean, I like Tom Watson. I've worked with him personally. He could not have been nicer to me every time I dealt with him back in my previous golf flack life. But boy, when it comes to buzzkills, yeah, Tom's a hell of a rally killer. It was not outside of that. We'll get to that in a moment. It was clear what side CBS was on. If you watch the telecast, they wouldn't show a live player unless they were either named John Rahm or Bryson DeChambeau.
Mm.
And one was the defending champion and the other was contending the whole week until he hit the 55th hole and remembered he had to play more than 54 holes. And that was it for old Bryson.
That play, just to jump in, the play, he had after the second round when they interviewed him, he was talking about how important it was to be patient, in these conditions and what have you. And then he goes and makes one of the stupidest damn shots or shot attempts I've ever seen on the 15th hole when he tried to hook, hit about a 50-yard hook around a strand of trees into the green and proceed to make. Did he make double there or
I
triple?
think he made double.
But it was just a really really stupid play. Anyway, I had to throw that in.
Of course you did. But there was still some snark there. I mean, Wyndham Clark, the defending U.S. Open champion, who by the way missed the cut.
Right.
Someone asked him after his first round if a comeback was still doable, and he says, "Yeah, we got 54 holes. In live golf, they only play 54, so I like my chances." Make no mistake, this is going to be a running story as long as this is going on.
Right.
And there's no way you're going to be able to shove it under the rug as everybody is trying to do, because every time they try to do something like that, someone will say something or something will happen and it's back, on the pages and on air again.
Yes. And the one live player that I have no idea where his head is at right now is John Rahm. And Barry, we talked a little about this last week when you were and I were attempting to do this. But Rahm the entire week was he was a wreck. He was nervous about the champions dinner and from everything from where are people going to like the menu I gave to how's everybody going to get along. He's not been comfortable live at all. He's been making noises about well, maybe we should be going to 72-hole tournaments. But the one that really I got a kick out of was that he was disappointed because not everybody, his old buddies on the PGA Tour, not all of them greeted him warmly. And to that I say, well, after after the statements you had made about being loyal to the PGA, your fealty is the word he uses, your fealty to the PGA Tour, and then all of a sudden deciding to take the money. It's understandable. Some people are going to be pissed off at you, and I think he got a little reality check this week as far as where he stands among his peers.
Well, say what you will about Rahm, but he'll be back at Augusta next year.
Well,
there were 13 live players that were in the Augusta field.
mhm.
3 of them, Joaquin Niemann, who got a special invite, Adrian Meronk, who was top 50 on the golf rankings, official world golf rankings, which he won't be for very long as he's on live, and Terrell Hatton, who qualified for the Tour Championship before jumping to live. They likely won't be back next year.
Right.
Everyone else is either a past Masters champion like Sergio, Patrick Reed, who I even hate saying his name.
Table for one.
Yeah, Patrick Table for one, Reed, Charles Schwartzel. Those guys are past champions, and then you got guys like DeChambeau that have exemptions, and Cam Smith because they want other majors. So you're not going to see some of these guys next year, as long as this whole thing with live is going down, and there isn't a peace treaty or something rapprochement anywhere on the horizon, no matter what Jay Monahan says. As long as that's happening, you're going to see fewer and fewer live players in the field, unless they start winning majors in bunches.
Right. Koepka also.
Another one. Yeah.
He'll be back because of his.
Yeah. He'll be back. He's got because he won the PGA.
But he had a poor tournament. 3 guys in the top 10, lower end of the top 10, but still, But other than that, Dustin Johnson.
Yeah.
It was he plus 13 after two rounds? It was just some ridiculous.
Yeah.
I would like to just
Brian, what about your bets, Brian? You made some bets. You did well.
I would have made. I picked 3 golfers. Scottie Scheffler happened to be one of them at plus 450 because even though he was,
well, you went out on a limb on that one.
Basically bathing in chalk, you couldn't not take him. My other 2 were Koepka at 20-1, and my little flyer on Shane Lowry at 50-1. Because all 3 of those guys have the game and have the form for going into Augusta. I mean, I figured Koepka's a major champion, getting him at 20-1 to play a major. That's worth a few quid right there. But yeah, those were the 3 that I would have, that I was really bullish on. The 3 I was really bearish on. Well, one was Victor Hovland, Gary's favorite golfer, one of Gary's favorite golfers, whose short game right now is worse than mine, and I haven't played since August. Ricky Fowler was one I was bearish on because, as Jack Nicklaus so aptly put it, you bring your game to Augusta, you don't try to find your game at Augusta, and Ricky's trying to find his game right now. I mean, he made the cut, but he was never in contention.
Right.
And then Tony Finau, who's got Brian Robbins syndrome, in that when he's driving the ball well, his short game is an atrocity bordering on war crime, and when he's driving the ball horribly, he can sink every putt and chip up next to greens, almost at a whim. So those were the 3 I was bearish on. Finau and Fowler made the cut, but never were remotely on the first page of the leaderboard. And Hovland missed the cut.
Yeah. I'll tell you as I did, of course I bet, extravagantly. I always lay down $2. I actually made four wagers. Now the 2 that did not work out, I didn't want to go with Scheffler just because, chalk, right? So I went with Matsuyama to win, which did not work out, which kind of surprised me a little bit because he'd been playing pretty well coming into the tournament. Then I went from Mickelson to finish in the top 20, which was a pretty good value bet.
That's a pretty good bet.
But no. Now the two that did come in for me, one was a real stretch. It was the kid who won the prior week, the lefty Batia, to make the cut, and he did make the cut. And the other one was for Ludwig Adler to finish in the top 10.
Very good bet.
That was well, actually, that one I was documented in my blog. If he had not succumbed to the Augusta rookie mistake of getting greedy on number 11, he could have pressed Scheffler a little closer, I think.
The only reason I didn't pick him in my top 3 is because of the rookie factor.
Yeah. No.
You asked me this next year if he's playing as well as he's playing now, and yeah, he's a slam dunk to get picked, and I'm sure the numbers, his odds will go down accordingly. I mean, as it was, I'm trying to remember what he was odds wise, but it was like, I don't know, it was like 18-1, 20-1. It was somewhere in that neighborhood. It was pretty low for a Masters rookie,
right? And
it's going to be even lower next year.
Yeah. So Barry, you had asked about Watson, Norman and Watson.
We can talk about Watson.
The Watson story is pretty funny. They're at the Champions dinner. Everybody seems to be getting along, having a good old time, and we'll edit that out. Yeah.
Edit that out, would you?
Yes. Anyway, it was getting. Was Watson asked to say a few words, or did he just?
No, he asked Fred Ridley if he could say a few words, and Ridley said, "Of course." And I'll let you take it from there.
Well, basically, he said, "Isn't this nice that we're all getting along together?" And all of a sudden, the room just kind of like stopped. And Tom, and everybody left about 2 minutes after that.
Oh yeah, he said, it's great. I'm looking around. Everyone's having a wonderful experience. We're having a great time. They're jovial. Everybody's having a great time. Isn't it great to be together again? And then there was some kind of tepid applause.
Yeah.
And then Ray Floyd got up, and then it was like that was the cue for everybody else to get up and leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the problem there, well, obviously, aside from, Watson playing rally killer, the problem there is then it bleeds over to everybody else. So the next day, Jack Nicklaus gets asked after he's one of the ceremonial starters with Gary Player and Watson. Nicklaus gets asked, what needs to happen and what's going on. And Jack comes out and says that, the best outcome is the best players play against each other. And I asked Jay Monahan about this, and I told him I don't want to know what's going on because I don't want to have to lie to the press about it.
Yes.
When they ask me. Yeah. And Jay said, everything's going well. And so he says, okay, if everything's going well, I trust you. But we really need to have this thing get taken care of. And Gary Player, of course, who's never been shy about talking about anything.
Often wrong, never in doubt. Yeah.
And he's exactly often wrong, never in doubt. I really would like to get you to see one of my former coworkers, Damian Secor, does the best Gary Player impression. It's hysterical, but I digress. Player says that, it's not healthy and we need to fix this. And of course, they stuck a mic in his face and he was off and running about that. He's like, it's a big problem because, and he hit the nail on the head, they paid all these guys to go to live, and the guys that decided not to take the money and stay behind are looking at it like, where's our payout?
Right.
And when are we getting paid? All these guys got paid and now you're going to let them come back? That's going to be a sticking problem through this whole situation. And of
think
all the byproducts that come out of this situation, which we've talked about before, you know, how unhealthy it is for the middle level tour player, how unhealthy it is for the random tournament that doesn't have a $20 million purse. All of these byproducts have coming from Live, and they're going to keep getting worse until they figure out how the hell to get this thing fixed.
and there really is no solution in sight. As you probably know, there was a meeting in the Bahamas last month where the PGA Tour, the players from the PGA Tour board finally met His Excellency over in the Bahamas to meet His Excellency and to, you know, but no real progress was made out of there. And I do think one of the, you know, that the pathway back to the PGA Tour for Live players, I think even the PGA Tour players are divided on as to how that should happen. You know, I think Spieth, who's on the board now, was, you know, pretty adamant about, you know, they just can't waltz right back in. There needs to be some kind of, you know, penalty or pathway, or however you want to put it. But and then there are other players who say, well, look, we you know, the heck with that. Let's just get everybody back together and play. And that divide is, you know, is probably going to persist for a good while.
It's going to, it has to, because there's just too much money at stake, and there's too many egos at stake. And you put the two of those things together, and here we are. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't see this thing getting fixed in any conceivable fashion that's going to be agreeable to everybody.
Right.
There's too much money, and there's too many egos in stake. Now, Barry, you asked earlier about Rory McIlroy. Part of Rory's problem is he spent the better part of a year basically being the point person for the PGA Tour. And the tour, of course, was happy to let him do that.
Yep. It was more than anything else.
And they couldn't get him in front of a mic fast enough because it meant they didn't have to do it. Right. And Rory, because he's very loyal to the tour, and he understands what the tour means, and he cares about his legacy. I mean, that's the one thing about Rory, is he cares about his legacy in this game. And he looks around and he's like, well, nobody else is talking about it, about defending the tour and what this place means to everybody. I might as well do it. Well, like we talked about earlier, when you put yourself in that position, something's got to give. And what gave was Rory's game. Yes, he could go out and randomly shoot a 63 or a 64 in a major and contend here and there, but it took a toll on his game. The fact that he was basically defending the PGA Tour, and nobody from the PGA Tour, you know, from Ponte Vedra, where their headquarters are in the northeast corner of Florida, nobody else was. You saw what it did to his game. And then finally, Rory, who was on the board, finally said, you know what, enough. I'm not getting any better. It's hurting my game. They're not doing anything. The tour's not doing anything to fix this, other than making random announcements that they have fixed it. And we haven't seen anything coming out of it. And he's like, screw it. Let someone else take the slings and arrows and get out there. I'm not going to do it anymore.
He took a tremendous lot of crap from, you know, from people from Live. And like I said, he was a meat shield. I mean, that's the only way to describe it.
What does a top PGA player make versus a top Live player? I mean, the reason I ask is, I mean, we're talking about millionaires complaining about other millionaires.
Yeah, that's the essence
resonate of it. Well, doesn't resonate.
Barry, that's a hard question to answer, because there's like 1,000 answers to it. For example, John Rahm took an estimated probably $450 to $500 million to jump to live. He's not going to make that amount on the golf course on the PGA Tour. It'll take him what, Gary?
Oh,
15, 20 years
at least.
to
Now,
make that on the course. Now, we're not talking about endorsement income here.
right,
We're talking about just what what you kill is what you eat.
right.
Scottie Scheffler, who's having, a season for the ages right now. We're in the middle of April. He's made $15.1 million. And he's at the top of the PGA Tour food chain at 15.1. So it's a hard question to answer because there's so many answers to the question. You could look down the money list, and you got guys that are, barely breaking even, that are pretty damn good golfers, and they're, making, a few thousand here and there. Last place at the Masters, which is where Tiger finished, made a little over about 30, I think it was $39,600 was last place at the Masters. Last place at a regular tour event is maybe half that.
Yeah. Well,
So it's a question without a definite answer because there's so many guys making so much money at so many different levels, and not everybody who went to live is making that kind of money. I mean, you got the Mickelsons, the Dustin Johnsons, the John Rahms. They're making 9 figures easy, but not everybody who jumped to live is making 9 figures.
no. And I think, Brian, you mentioned one of the sticking points with trying to get a resolution to all this is the what's going to happen to mid-level tour players. One possible outcome, we're already seeing this happen to some degree on the PGA Tour are these, what I guess they call them, signature events,
Yeah, the
where
$20 million signature events. Yes.
yeah, so instead of 144 player fields, it's 80. And I would not be surprised at the end of the day in all this, we have some kind of super tour. And let's not think about it in terms of live versus PGA. Let's just think about it as like, some entity where you're going to have this series of tournaments, which is, that's been a vision for Norman.
Norman's had that vision for 25 years.
Correct.
Longer than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would not surprise me that an outcome would be, to have that, to have have this signature event tour for lack of a better term, and then you have a tour that's somewhere between that and what exists in Corn Ferry these days, and maybe with some kind of relegation or movement, among the three entities, with players going up and down, depending on performance. My biggest thing with live, putting aside where the money actually comes from, we can all, agree to the fact that being
It's sports washing.
yeah, but putting that, if we put that aside, my biggest beef, if you will, is professional golf had always been a meritocracy. You get paid based on your performance. It might be one of the few, putting endorsements aside, you're paid for your performance. If you don't play well, you don't get paid, or you don't get paid as much. And that to me is what really set it apart from, other sports, where guys, in baseball, football, basketball, most of the time they're getting largely paid on past performance. And with live, LIV has actually kind of taken that, that model for its best players. You're a big star. We're going to give you this much money. And that to me is what really sucks about this whole situation. I'm really curious to see what the ratings were for this Masters because, as you probably know, um, up until the Masters, the ratings for PGA tournaments this year has been down by 20%. Live ratings are non-existent.
Yeah, they're non-existent.
Yeah,
They're microscopic.
right. So I would be curious to see what the ratings were for the Masters once you have, you know, ostensibly the best players in the world, uh, back together again. Because that would, I know Barry, you've asked me in the past, you know, what the impact is. Does it really matter if these guys are playing on the PGA Tour or not? Are people still going to watch it? Well, I'm going to watch it because it's what I do. but
Right.
but for less enthusiastic followers, I think I think it's been a combination of people being fed up with as you put it before, millionaires, griping with other millionaires. But I also think that not having good fields in more tournaments has that impact as well.
Gary, you hit.
One of the things you talk about signature events.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that in the 80s and the 90s, Boston and LA and Golden State and Chicago, they all got there by beating teams.
Right.
And so Boston had to get through Philadelphia, and Lakers had to get through Sacramento, Utah, Chicago. If you have a signature event, they're there. And you don't get the sense that they, as you say, the meritocracy of that week or that tournament or that series will be gone. And if you have the 20 best players playing in a tournament, and again, they're all millionaires, does it really matter who finishes fifth or sixth or seventh? Other than to their own ego and to fans who particularly like John Rahm, let's say. And so one of the things about the tournament now is with 100 and however many players, you do get the sense that any one of them could win, get on a streak.
Uh, Brian, I think we've had this conversation before, but the Masters, for all of its traditions and pomp and circumstance, it's it's a pretty you can pretty much eliminate a good third of the field before
At least.
Right.
At least you could probably eliminate a good 2/3 of the field in many years. It
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
traditionally the weakest field of the four majors.
Right. Right.
And that's kind of a little hidden thing that nobody talks about outside of us, but it does.
Right.
Because you've got 59-year-old or 60-year-old Fred Couples playing. You've got guys that are in their late 50s or that are playing that aren't going to be competitive on that course anymore.
Most
It's
rookies
typically
fare very well.
you can cross almost all the rookies out. Anybody that's playing that course for the first time, you can draw a line through their names as well. Guys that come in who aren't in good form or who haven't won a tour event that calendar year, you can usually cross them off as well.
Right.
I think 9 of the last 14 Masters winners had won a tournament in that calendar year going down on their way to Augusta. So you can draw a line through 2/3 of the field in the Masters every year, and you're pretty safe in the third that you haven't drawn a line through. Somebody's going to come out and win the thing.
And yet we go gaga over it. And
we do.
And the reason is that, particularly for guys like me who, grew up in the Northeast and, and now in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, where we've, been weathering a winter, we see Augusta National in all of its springtime glory. And, the schmaltzy music, the dulcet tones of the
It's America's golf course. I mean, I've
is.
never stepped foot in the city of Augusta, never mind never mind getting in Augusta National for either for a round of golf or to play or to watch the Masters. But I can tell you, I can describe most of those holes to you and tell you where you don't want to hit it, where you can hit it, just because I've been watching this tournament since I was basically a teenager.
Yeah.
And it's America's golf course.
Right.
Everybody, even if you've never taken one step into that golf course, you know that course. You know what the Sunday pins are going to be. You know that you can't get greedy and try to hit, to right at the pin on number 12 on Sunday.
Right.
And you know what you can and what you cannot do, despite the fact you've never walked on the Augusta National Golf Club premises. That's why it's America's course. That's why people love it. They know that course. And it's a rite of spring, and people eat it up like Greek yogurt.
Mm-hmm. And I confess, I did get to go to a practice round back in 2016, and you could bring somebody with you who's never set foot on a golf course, and they'll just walk around the place and just be blown away by the sheer beauty of it. And for all the sins of the past, and some which may be still continuing, at Augusta National, just in terms of its exclusivity, its past, history of racism and misogyny. Fact is, those guys know how to run a tournament.
They do.
It's unbeatable as a spectator experience. They don't gouge you for ticket prices or for, concessions. If you're not on the grounds, the television presentation, if you put the music aside, is always first rate. They now have streaming options where you can see even more of the tournament if you want to. They know how to run a tournament, and that's
4 minutes of commercials an hour, Barry.
Exactly.
Tell me a sporting event where you get 4 minutes of commercials an hour. I'll wait.
Well, yeah, but then you gotta watch a minute of Cadillac commercials or something. It's interminable.
Still, it's 4 minutes of commercial. You compare them to what you're going to see at the U.S. Open when NBC does it, and you are beaten over the head by Madison Avenue. It's almost to the point of being unwatchable what NBC has done to their golf telecast, but that's a subject for another time. They do know how to run a tournament at Augusta, and that's undeniable.
But I'm with Gary. I'm curious to see what the ratings are.
Yeah.
To mix sports metaphors, the inside baseball take on the Masters is something that I guess every sport has it, right?
Well, that's why you come to us here, because we give you that.
There is one thing that I wanted to touch on originally when we're going to do the preview podcast, if you will. But I just wanted to mention, they do know how to run a tournament, but there are certain things that you do not do on the grounds of Augusta National. You don't run. You don't wear your hat backwards. And Ricky Fowler was actually admonished for politely but firmly by an Augusta National member when he saw him, wearing his hat backwards. He just said, "We don't do that here, young man." Turned it around.
Didn't Jason Day get lectured about a sweater he was wearing?
Yeah, it had a very visible marketing. I don't even know who the company is.
I don't either.
It was. I mean, look, Jason Day wins the award for the worst sartorial presentation of the week.
Easily.
But one of the more interesting stories from the past. We could go on with these forever, but this one I just have to tell. So Cliff Roberts was Bobby Jones's co-founder, if you will, of Augusta National. He was a stern man, very wealthy man, very racist man, but he ran he ran the both the club and the tournament with an iron fist. So back in the 40s, there was a guy named Frank Stranahan, who was he was an amateur, but he was also one of the best golfers in the world. You know,
Heir to the champion spark plug fortune.
right. So he, born on third base, as a lot of people say, but he was a outstanding golfer. He was also a bodybuilder. And after retiring from golf, he actually won some age group bodybuilding competitions. But he was also something of a ladies' man. And one year at the Masters, there's a rule that said that you can play practice rounds during the week at Augusta, but you only hit one shot from the fairway. Now, when you get to the putting green, you can practice putting from different angles, but they only want you to hit one ball from the fairway. Well, Stranahan in 1947 was warned because he had hit more than one ball from the fairway during a practice round. He came back the following year, and during his practice round, an official came to him and said, "You can't hit two balls from the fairway." He said, "I know that. You told me that. I didn't do that." I said, "Well, I heard that you did." And he was actually removed from the grounds and was suspended for playing for a year. A rumor had it that the real reason behind Stranahan's suspension was that he was having an affair with the wife of one of the Augusta National members. And if you really wanted to dig deep, he was actually having an affair with the secretary of Cliff Roberts. So that's something that, if you're if you're in the field at Augusta National, make sure that you keep it in your pants.
Gary, you're the first person I know, the only person I know of who actually knows somebody who won the lottery to get a practice round ticket at Augusta. I tried for 5 straight years and went 0 for 5.
Well, I did not actually win the lottery.
Well, I said you know somebody who did. Which...
Well, actually, it's even better than that. There's one of Bobby Jones's contemporaries was another great amateur golfer by the name of Charlie Yates.
Yates, yep.
Yep. And actually, Charlie Yates, when they put the first tee program in the Atlanta area, they named it after Charlie Yates. Anyway,
longtime member, yeah.
Well, his
I think his son is a member or something.
His son is a member now.
Yeah.
And he's a neighbor of one of my best friends, Chet Hurwitz. And Chet's had through that friendship, Chet's had the opportunity to play Augusta National a few times. He's actually been inside and entertained clients in the Butler cabin.
Wow.
But Chet really pisses me off sometimes.
Yeah, he's pissing me off, and he's pissing me off, and I don't even know him.
Well, he's a great guy. But there was one, I remember talking to him one year, and said, "So, Pop, how's your weekend going?" This is when I was still living up north, and well, our golf course is open. I'm going to get to play golf for the first time this weekend. I'm just really pumped. And he said, "So, what are you up to, Chet?" He said, "Well, going to the Final Four on Saturday, and on Monday I'm teeing it up at Augusta." Okay. So, anyway, Chet and Charlie got Chad a couple tickets. You know, every few years he comes through with some tickets, and Chad invited me that year, and
That's nice.
yeah, it was. I
It's a
mean,
nice story.
well, and you know, again, put everything else aside. It's just, you know, like I say, it's a beautiful walk. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
and seeing in person is you know, it's fabulous. I will not deny it.
Nor should you.
Barry, you have anything else for us? Or
Next year, what are we talking about?
well, I see no, I see no change in the live PGA.
Okay.
You know, debacle, dilemma, whatever you want to call it. Um, I think the Saudis are playing a long game. You know, no
Playing a
matter
long game with more money.
exactly
With a lot more money.
a lot
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
So, which is a shame, but yeah. Oh, one more thing I should mention. So there are two figures, you know, involved with golf that happen to live here at least part time in Steamboat Springs. One of them is Jay Monahan, who, you know, we're still plotting to put a Saudi flag on his front yard. But the other guy is Vern Lundquist, and I really admired the way he handled, you know, the fact that this was maybe his last Masters, his last broadcast. Did not, you know, refused to make it about himself. You know, Jim Nance was giving him the flowers, and you know, as well they should. You know, Vern's, you know, a great, you know, a really fine announcer. I mean, he announced everything from golf to football to figure skating.
He did Bowling for Dollars in the Dallas area when he was at when he was at I think it was WFAA in Dallas. He was he hosted the Bowling for Dollars show in Dallas. We had Chick Hearn hosting it in Los Angeles.
Oh, geez.
You had Vern Lundquist doing it in Dallas.
And my favorite Vern Lundquist story is he broadcast an early NCAA game tournament from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Is that the Barclays Center? Yeah.
Yes.
And this guy's been all over the world, and he's, you know, broadcast from Madison Square Garden a million times, and he in the middle of this early portion of the broadcast at the Barclays Center goes, "This is really nice." He goes, "I've never been to Brooklyn," which I thought was astonishing that he had never been to Brooklyn. Of course, but if you spent any time in New York City back in the 70s and 80s, why would you go to Brooklyn? Now, of course, you go, but I've never been to Brooklyn. This is nice. So that's my Vern Lundquist story.
Well, there's one story of his which involves him and, you know, one of my favorite people of all time, Al McGuire. And of course, you know, McGuire typically broadcast. The play-by-play guy was Dick Enberg.
Right.
Well, there was one broadcast where Dick couldn't make it, and Vern was going to do the play-by-play with Al. Well, he'd never worked with Al before, and what he didn't understand about Al was that Al didn't know the name of his own players half the time. I mean, for years he called Jerome Whitehead Chapman. Craig Buttram, who's the backup center, was the big white kid. You know, but you know, as you know, Al, you know, when game time came, Al just had this tremendous feel for the game, and also had this great sense of humor. In any event, Vern is going over the rosters, you know, prior to this game with Al, and Al says, "Vern, I don't want to know any of that. Okay, let me do my thing and you do yours." And Vern said it was one of the most fun broadcasting experiences he ever had. Anyway, it was, you know, I thought, you know, they gave him, you know, the appropriate send off, and
They did, and he had the appropriate line with you know, saying that Scottie Scheffler was the man of the hour, and that's how he left it.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
which perfect.
exactly. Oh, guys,
There, anything else for us, Barry?
I think I've got everything covered that I wanted to get covered.
Beautiful.
that's fabulous. Well, we finally got around to doing this. Unfortunately, Brian, I understand you have to work for a living, but you really need to, get your priorities straight
Yeah, I know.
for these.
I know.
For what we're paying you, Brian, there's no excuse.
There
That's
is no excuse. I'll do better next time and not let my
Please.
two big brothers down. Okay.
All right.
well. Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun, and for the half dozen people who'll be watching this tomorrow, we hope they.
We hope they're entertained. Yeah, this is a blast.
The goal every podcast is to have more people watching than there were doing it.
That's
the
the
key.
idea. That's the key.
Okay.
I think
All right.
I think that's an attainable goal.
Maybe.
All right. Especially
All right,
especially
guys.
if we listen to it.
Yeah.
All right.
See ya.
Thank you guys for this. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
See ya.
Same here. Same here.